Okay, thank you everybody for joining. As usual, just throw a comment in the chat there to let me know that you can hear everything okay. This way I know we can keep going. Also, let me know if everything sounds okay. If you need me to bump up my volume, I can do that as well. Okay, looks like everything sounds good. If at any point you need me to raise any volume, just throw me a message. So, thank you for joining. This is what's being billed as the final January 6th committee hearing. We've obviously had 8 previous hearings prior to this where we heard from everyone ranging from Cassidy Hutchinson to Republican secretaries of state, aides to Mike Pence, people who have come from state legislatures, elections workers. So at this committee hearing, I don't believe that we're going to hear from any witnesses, but it's been reported that we will hear from based on thousands of hours or thousands of documents from the Secret Service that were presented over. They've also spoken to people recently, including former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, former Trump Secretary of Transportation Elaine Chao, and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. So the committee has spoken to all of those people recently, so we expect to hear some information regarding that, but I think the bulk of it will be with regard to, I believe it says, more than 1 million communications from the Secret Service. And there was reporting prior to this about how the Secret Service hadn't given all of their text messages in, so I'm sure that we'll hear more from that. I interviewed Jamie Raskin. Let me raise my volume just a hair. Okay, this should be a little bit better. Test. Okay, I think we're good to go. So I spoke with Jamie Raskin a couple weeks back, and Jamie also said that he expects that they'll focus this committee hearing on Secret Service communications and what we don't know. So that's what we expect to hear from this one. In any case, they've done a pretty effective job thus far at keeping everybody engaged in what they're doing. So regardless of what avenue they take at this committee hearing, I don't think it'll be there'll be any lack of interest in this one. So with that said, I know that we have just about an hour until this committee hearing begins. So whereas I would normally have spoken about the previous committee hearings, I think it would be probably more interesting for us to talk about some recent news items. One that happened yesterday with regard to Trump was that a judge ruled that he would have to sit for a deposition in the defamation case between him and E. Jean Carroll. E. Jean Carroll, in the 90s, about 20 years ago, had accused Trump of raping her when he met her in a New York City department store. He had sued in 2019, he said he denied those allegations when she came out and accused him publicly by saying that she's not my type, she's just lying to boost her book sales. So, let me bump this up just a tad more. She's not my type, she's just lying to be able to boost book sales. Carroll sued him for defamation. A judge ruled yesterday, after Trump had been delaying this case for more than 20 months, a judge ruled yesterday that he would have to sit for a deposition in less than 1 week from today. That's October 19th. He'll be sitting for a deposition in that case. He's trying to sue and claim that because he was acting as because he was the president of the United States, it was actually the DOJ, the Department of Justice, that was responsible for this case, that was actually the ones sued for defamation, because a president, when he's a president, doesn't represent himself, he represents the federal government. And so he's saying, well, your beef isn't with me, because when I said those words, I was the president of the United States, I was acting on behalf of the U.S. government, so it's actually the U.S. government that you have to sue. You can't actually sue the U.S. government for defamation, which means that as soon as he's able to be granted this idea that, in fact, the real defendant in this case is the government, that case will immediately end because the government can't be sued for defamation. So that's what he's trying to do. The DC Court of Appeals now is looking into this idea that, okay, whereas normally if you say something while you're president, it is the office of the presidency who's responsible. But in this case, was he acting on behalf of the government within the scope of his role as president, or was he acting outside the scope of his role? Obviously, reason would have it that if you start speaking about an old rape case from the 90s and accusing somebody of making that accusation because they want to sell books, that doesn't exactly fall under the scope of the duties of the President of the United States. So we'll see what the DC Court of Appeals actually says, but it would stand to reason that this isn't exactly within that scope, and what Trump said was outside the scope of his role as president, and so he would be the one who would be held liable for what he said, and so he would be the one who would be able to be sued for defamation and not the government, and in that case would be able to proceed. So we're waiting for that from the Court of Appeals, but in the meantime, this case is still moving forward. Trump will sit down for a deposition, barring any unforeseen events, which obviously could happen anytime between now and then, but he'll be sitting down for that deposition less than a week from today. That is, of course, just one of the myriad legal issues that he's gotten himself into. There is the DOJ investigation into stolen documents from Mar-a-Lago, where he was asked to return a slew of documents. Then those documents were subpoenaed. He had lawyers sign off on his behalf because he told them that he'd given everything back. He obviously hadn't given everything back. When the DOJ, when the FBI finally came in to Mar-a-Lago to retrieve those documents, they found over 300. So that case is still ongoing now, and we'll find out if there's going to be any indictment. When I've spoken to Glenn Kirshner on my interview series here, he said that it's pretty much an open and shut case in terms of the likelihood that Trump will get indicted. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens on that front as well. Then, of course, there is the one pertaining to this hearing right here, January 6th committee, and the events of January 6th. They've charged or indicted hundreds and hundreds of people in this investigation. Obviously, everything is leading up to one person, and that's Donald Trump. So we'll see what they do on that front as well. The one thing you can count on is all this stuff moves really slow, which is why it's good that we have these committee hearings, because otherwise we would hear absolutely nothing. And if you're like me, you have the propensity to start to lose your mind a little bit when you see all of this like overt criminality happening in broad daylight and then nothing happens. And of course, these investigations take a ton of time. There's even more time added because of the fact that this is a former president, and obviously there's political implications, blah, 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 that doesn't matter, or it shouldn't matter. But all of this stuff takes a really long time, and doesn't exactly like comport with our, what we think, which is that like you commit a crime, you should be held accountable for it in some degree of a reasonable amount of time. We don't exactly see that reasonable amount of time, but at least we have these committee hearings so that we have something to kind of show what the progress of an investigation looks like. And hopefully that investigation in the January 6th committee is concurrent with what's happening in the DOJ. The DOJ has asked the January 6th committee for a bunch of documents. I'm not sure at this point if they're continuing to cooperate with the DOJ. I know that the DOJ has gotten some documents from the January 6th committee. I'm not sure if they continue to, but in any case, they're watching. So there's that. At this point, we have a little bit of time. I'm happy to talk about other things if you want to ask specific questions. If there's something that you're especially interested in or concerned about, or you have questions about, throw it in the chat and we can speak about that. We have a little bit of time, as opposed to just rehashing all 8 January 6th committee hearings that happened before this. And thank you to people while we're doing that, while I'm waiting for those to come in, because there's about a 20-second delay. Thank you there's people telling me that they're here from all over the world, which is pretty amazing. So thank you for tuning in. I know that you have a ton of places where you can watch this, a ton of channels where you can watch this, so thank you. Julie Jones asked, are they trying to prove that he sold classified documents? I don't believe that they're trying to prove he sold classified documents now. I think that they're just trying to prove the fact that he... honestly, you don't necessarily have to do that for it to have been considered a crime. I mean, just the fact that he took those documents, that he took classified documents, as Republicans have made the whole world well aware, you can't take classified documents, you can't mishandle classified documents. That was the whole basis of the Hillary Clinton saga. They spent like 7 years wailing about the fact that a federal official was in possession of classified documents. Hillary Clinton was found at the end to have taken no top secret documents. Meanwhile, Trump has a barrel full of 300 mixed in with his personal affairs. So I don't think it's that they're trying to prove that he sold classified documents, although that would be, I mean, that would be the crime of the century, which I know is overused at this point, but my God, if he actually sold classified documents and they had proof of that, that would be so on a different level, unlike anything we'd ever seen in this country's history. This is already that. This is already unlike anything we've seen in this country's history, but that would be next level, like, stuff. So it's just that they're trying to show that he took them, and he did, and it's a pretty open and shut case, so, but it still takes time. Someone asked, who will run for Democrats and who will run for Republicans? Look, I'm not in the prediction business, but if I had to guess, I mean, just right now, a snapshot at this very moment, I would say that the Republican nominee would be Donald Trump and the Democratic nominee would be Joe Biden. If I had to guess, that's what I would say. You know, there's obviously a lot of talk on both sides that there's many people who don't want those to be the nominees. We'll see what happens. You know, if you had asked me how things were looking in December of, 2020? December of 2019, and, you know, would I have known what would happen 2 months later? You know, a lot can change in just a couple of months here. So, but if I had to guess, if I had to put money on it right now, I would say Biden and Trump. That's the easy guess. I don't know when the last time an incumbent decided not to run for president was, but there's a reason that there's that incumbency advantage. And when you're looking at Trump versus Biden, we have proof already, definitive proof already, that Biden can beat Trump because he did. So we'll see what happens. You know, I wouldn't say with any degree of certainty, but if I just had to guess, you know, just by any degree of like a majority of what I think is probably Biden versus Trump. What happens first? Trump announces 2024 candidacy or DOJ files charges? That's a good question, and a lot of people are saying that, oh my God, I feel like I sound like Trump here, like many people are saying, but there are a lot of analysts and people online and journalists who are suggesting that Trump would announce so that he can say, oh, well, there are rules then regarding what the DOJ can do in terms of announcing investigations for a political candidate. Obviously, he's not a political candidate until if that rule comes into effect, where the DOJ can't do anything within, I believe, 60 days before an election. It's still not going to have any impact now because he's not on the ballot for a year and a half. So. But then there's the fact that if he announces and says that he's a candidate, then he can point to all these open investigations and basically say, look, they're only doing it because they're afraid of me. It's because I'm a candidate. It's because they're trying to use the power of their office to sink my campaign. He's going to say that anyway. He's already basically saying that anyway. So if we're going to think that that him announcing his candidacy is going to change anything, all of the excuses that he would use if he were to announce that he's running for president are what he's using right now. It's going to make no difference. And the DOJ shouldn't listen to any political bullshitting anyway about whether he's going to be a candidate for office, whether he's a former candidate for office. The fact is that he did what he did and just move forward with those investigations anyway, which should go without saying. What good are impeachments if Trump is allowed to run again? So you can be impeached. Impeaching in the political process is basically being charged. Whether he's convicted is another story. So if he was convicted in his last impeachment trial, he would not have been able to run for president again. But you can be impeached. It's basically being charged, but I mean, it's you being charged for a crime. You still have the right to a trial. The difference here is that the jury in that trial is a bunch of political hacks. I mean, it's half of those people are in his own party, and so they have a vested interest in making sure that the guy who leads their own party isn't held accountable for his crimes. And in fact, a lot of the jurors there were co-conspirators or participants in the exact crime that he was being charged for. So obviously a flawed process, but that's the difference between impeachment and conviction. The irony here, though, is we've seen this civil war erupt between Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell, between the MAGA wing of the Republican Party and the establishment wing of the Republican Party. And I say establishment very generously because they are just as forgiving to the lunatic MAGA wing, the authoritarian wing of the party, as the MAGA people themselves, with just a thin veneer of like, I don't know, this facade of like responsible Republican fiscal responsibility, whatever. In any case, the irony is that McConnell refused to whip votes against Donald Trump when he was in his impeachment trial for inciting January 6th. McConnell didn't vote for that conviction. He didn't push any of his members to vote for that conviction. There were 7 Republicans who opted anyway to like follow their conscience and vote for his conviction, but ultimately he was acquitted because you need 2/3 of the Senate. Now, McConnell's dealing with Trump riling up this lunatic wing of the party and replacing candidates who probably could win with candidates instead like Herschel Walker, Dr. Oz, J.D. Vance, who because they're such poor quality candidates, keep these races competitive in places that shouldn't be competitive for Republicans. I mean, we're talking about Ohio. We're talking about Georgia. We're talking about a number of these places because they have such poor quality candidates. Republicans in a midterm year where the Democrats are in power should walk away with this stuff. But McConnell decided that he would allow Trump to like have that space and like retain his power in the GOP by virtue of not pushing for that conviction. And now Trump is turning around and undermining people like Mitch McConnell when Mitch McConnell tries to win these elections. So, you know, I know that Trump had his diatribe the other day when he released his statement and issued some super racist remarks about McConnell's wife, Elaine Chao. But again, the irony of that is that the only reason that Trump has any power these days is because McConnell allowed him to keep it. If McConnell had just voted for his conviction and pushed his caucus to vote for that conviction, Trump wouldn't be allowed to run again. He wouldn't be a force in the Republican Party. The only reason that Trump has any power and the only reason that Trump makes these statements and they carry any weight attacking Mitch McConnell is because of someone like Mitch McConnell, because McConnell himself refused to do anything about it. So that's the ultimate irony here. And, it's just like this fealty, this blind fealty to Donald Trump that pervades the entire right. And even someone like Mitch McConnell, who like presents himself as this independent thinker on the right, as somebody who like isn't gonna kowtow to Donald Trump, who's gonna be not afraid to like present his own conservative bona fides, he's just as much of a doormat for Trump as the rest of them. And in fact, the only reason that Trump has any of this power is thanks to Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, almost more than any other person I can think of, is responsible for allowing Trump to get acquitted in that Senate trial. So I have no sympathy for Mitch McConnell when Trump comes out and attacks him and does what we all know that he does because we've been around for the last 5 years, because McConnell made it so that he'd be able to do that. So that's my thoughts on Mitch McConnell. Someone asked when the committee hearing is set to begin. We are about 45-50 minutes away from the committee hearing beginning. So it's going to be 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And by the way, while I'm looking for the next question, if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, please hit the subscribe button. It's free. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to pay any money or anything like that, but subscribing to this channel is the best way to support my work. I do these live streams for big events. So I'll do them for all of these January 6th committee hearings. I do them for major debates, major speeches, stuff like that. But then I'll also do daily breaking news videos, maybe 1, maybe 2 per day. And I have interviews every week. So I've interviewed everyone from Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, Pete Buttigieg, Jen Psaki. This week I had John Fetterman, which was pretty newsworthy because an NBC reporter came out and pointed to the fact that John Fetterman had to use captioning software so that he could follow along with the words. Obviously, John Fetterman just had a stroke. He's recovering from it. He's recovering well from that stroke, but uses captioning software so that he doesn't miss anything, so that then he can answer those questions. But if he needs the captioning software, which is not a far stretch, it's not a crazy thing to request when you've just had a stroke a few weeks back, they turn that into something where it's like, oh, John Fetterman had trouble understanding, and so he needed this captioning software, and we don't know that he knew what was going on. And then a bunch of other people, myself included, Kara Swisher, Molly Jong Fast, all chimed in. We're like, we all interviewed this guy within the last 7 days. He was completely fine. What are you talking about? If you look at my interview with John Fetterman on my channel, it's the latest interview on my interviews playlist, or either the latest interviews on my interviews playlist. The guy was completely fine. The only thing that he would do is switch the occasional word. And so, every once in a while he'd just switch 2 words or search for a word. And God knows if searching for a word was disqualifying, I wouldn't have a YouTube channel because most of my time is spent looking for the next word. But in any case, that was the drama, the contrived drama with the mainstream media this week is that they just, obviously the Fetterman-Oz race has been going well for Fetterman and not so well for Oz, and they needed some drama to inject in that race, and so they're trying to ham up this idea that John Fetterman is unable to understand words all of a sudden. Except you have a bunch of other interviewers, myself included, who've just spoken to him within the last week, and other than swapping out a single word at a time in 1 out of every 3 answers, the guy was completely fine, completely coherent, and imminently more qualified for the Senate than someone like Dr. Oz, who, as we all know, reporting came out recently that he was responsible for overseeing the death of dogs in experiments, of overseeing the deaths of puppies. I mean, my God, it's almost like comic book level villain status. So in any case, that's what happened this week with the whole Fetterman-Oz situation. I think that there's people who don't know the puppy situation with Oz, because I'm getting questions about Oz and puppies. So there was reporting that came out that Oz had overseen experiments at Columbia University where he was basically found to have been abusive toward animals. There were over 300 dogs that died in his experiments. A number of them were puppies. The puppies had been killed, and live puppies were thrown in a bag with littermates who had died. And I admittedly did not read the entire article because I couldn't. Not really my choice of political news that I want to sink my teeth into. So, but suffice it to say that Oz was responsible for overseeing experiments. The Columbia got fined, I believe, a few $1,000s, which is a tacit admission that they violated. There's a rule. I think it's the Animal Welfare Act. So Columbia was fined a few $1,000s. He was responsible for conducting experiments on at least 1,027 live animals, included dogs, pigs, calves, rabbits, rodents. He oversaw the death of 329 dogs, 31 pigs, 661 rabbits and rodents. Not gonna read the full article. If you want to find it, you can just search Dr. Oz experiments dogs and you'll find it. But not my jam in terms of I mean, it's almost like, the idea that's who they're running. Like, it's almost like a joke. Like, at least he didn't kill puppies is like a joke in terms of what you would say is like the worst possible thing that someone can do. It's the floor, the bare bottom, the most depraved thing that you could get caught doing. And as like a joke, though. And he actually did it. So I don't know what the GOP's infatuation with these candidates who have no ability to, like, it's like sociopathic level tendencies. Like, Donald Trump had no dog. Dr. Oz went so far in the opposite direction. Who would have thought that, like, a guy who didn't have a dog, like, already, or who uses like a dog as a way to describe the worst things? It's like, all right, well, Donald Trump is pretty much the bottom of the barrel in terms of, like, animal lovers. Man, were we wrong. Man, was that not on point. Now they're running candidates who are straight up killing them. Someone asked what my favorite Star Trek series is. I've never watched Star Trek. I have no idea who a single character in that show is. I've also never, there's a lot of things that I haven't watched, but anything sci-fi, I've never watched it. I also never watched Goodfellas. So I'm being asked, what are your thoughts on the letter from the Saudi Arabian royal family that came out today in regards to oil production? So let me check. So yeah, 6 hours ago, Saudi Arabia is basically siding with Russia on cuts to oil. It's pretty obvious to see why. So when you have OPEC Plus, which is the OPEC countries plus Russia, they have a vested interest in making sure that they cut oil production. That's to make sure that the prices of oil go up. When supply goes down and you have demand that's constant, the price is going to be higher for that supply. So they have a vested interest in, now that it's October, now that they have an election, and they don't want someone like Joe Biden, they don't want someone like the Democrats, a party like the Democrats, to be in office. So they're trying to put their finger on the scale, basically, by making gas more expensive, knowing full well that when gas prices go up, it's the party in power who's punished. And so basically Russia wants to be able to use funds from selling gas on the global market to continue funding their war in Ukraine. The United States doesn't want that, doesn't want to support Russian oil. We've blocked the import of Russian oil. We're pushing European countries to do the same, to transition to renewable energy. Transitioning to renewable energy is an existential threat for countries like the OPEC countries and for Russia, because obviously their economies are predicated on income from selling oil. So, we should have done this 10 years ago, and the fact that we should have done this 15 years ago, and the fact that we're talking about this now, and that we're scrambling right now because we've allowed ourselves to remain reliant on petrostates and foreign dictators is such an egregious failure to govern and failure to look even 1 inch in front of ourselves. And it was done by the Republicans. Democrats have been pleading for years to transition renewables, even to the point where, we see we have those same Republicans who wail about China, and yet we've basically conceded all that ground to China. We've basically ceded all that ground to China in terms of running the entire solar manufacturing for the world, and we haven't done any of that for ourselves here in the United States. All of the top solar panel manufacturing companies are Chinese. And only now that we've passed the Inflation Reduction Act and that we've slowly started moving toward renewables are we beginning to invest in renewable energy. And even just this small move toward renewables, thanks to this administration, we're already seeing a ton of manufacturing come back to the U.S. We're already seeing a ton of plants moving into Ohio and other Midwestern states that are going to build batteries for EVs. This should have been done a decade ago. Instead, we entrenched our reliance on fossil fuels. We had Republican majorities who made sure that the fossil fuel companies and the oil and gas companies were taken care of. We had Donald Trump, who did OPEC's bidding at every turn. I mean, he has tweets congratulating himself on doing exactly that, so that he could save OPEC, so he could save the oil and gas companies. And now we're in a position where, oh shit, Russia is using those profits to fund genocide, to fund their foreign wars, and we have no other alternative. We have no substitute because we didn't push for this transition to renewables sooner, like half of the country has been wailing for them to do. And so, the same thing with European countries as well. But like the fact that we couldn't see this coming, the fact that we have a country like Russia who for years, for decades, has been invading their neighbors. They did it in 2004. They did it in just prior to this in Ukraine, I believe 8 years ago, and now they're back in Ukraine now. But the fact that we couldn't see that, okay, we're reliant on the world, the global market, but the United States as well is reliant on Russian oil, and yet we're opting not to do anything to get to remove our reliance on that Russian oil, even as we know that they use those oil profits to fund wars against their neighbors, even encroaching on NATO countries, is such a gross oversight on our part. Or not an oversight. It's just a bunch of people who decided to continue cashing checks from fossil fuel companies because they wanted them to fund their re-election campaigns. And it's as easy as that. But, now those same people are pointing to high gas prices that are only high because there's a smaller supply in the global market because Russia and OPEC have decided to make that the case. They're pointing to those high gas prices, these are Republicans, and blaming it on Democrats, even though the only reason that we're reliant on those countries who can control the gas prices is because of Republicans. So, I mean, that's the danger of having those people be in charge. Or even if they're not in charge, just being able to dictate like what our energy policy is and be able to dictate like by virtue of the filibuster, by virtue of holding their majorities when they do have majorities, and really because of the fact that we haven't had a workable, a governing majority. And I'm not talking about what we have now because this is 50 seats. We have any legislation that isn't related to taxes that can't pass through reconciliation has to overcome that 60 vote threshold, which is impossible to overcome. So we haven't had like an actual governing majority in Congress since I could remember, since I've been following this stuff, maybe 2008. But even then, I mean, we had a ton of conservative Democrats who were able to water down the ACA. A bunch of Republicans who were able to water down the ACA and then opted not to vote for it in the end. Julie asked if Biden should pack the Supreme Court. Yes, I absolutely believe in packing the court. I think that this court is not legitimate. I think it was packed itself by a bunch of Republicans who decided that they would make up pretend rules for how it would suit them, and so they left one seat open for more than a year. They changed the composition of the court. Once they had, Donald Trump in office, they then allowed their seats to be filled by Republicans. And then that same rule that they made about not allowing the Supreme Court seats to be filled in an election year, they filled it like 5 minutes before the 2020 election. They filled it while people had already after people had already cast their ballot. So they make up rules. It's not a legitimate court. It doesn't. They lied in their confirmation hearings when they said they would respect precedent. They didn't. Every Republican voted to overturn Roe. It kind of does give you some insight into the fact that it really is all pretend. None of these institutions are like. It's just the people who sit on them, and they're just as flawed as anybody else. So I know that we like to pretend like the Supreme Court is this like neutral arbiter, is this omnipotent just call ball and strikes umpire of a political branch, but it's not. It's just the people who sit on it. They're just as flawed as any lawmakers or senators or presidents, and at this point, they're making up rules not based on what the law actually says, because we know what the law says, and we know that there was 50 years of precedent on precedent that says that a woman has the right to a safe and legal abortion in this country based on those privacy rights. But it's basically them just governing by virtue of what their ideological beliefs are. And so at this point, if we pretend that we can't do anything about it because we're like, oh, well, the Supreme Court is sacrosanct and 9 seats is sacrosanct. First of all, 9 seats isn't sacrosanct. They had 8 seats on it for more than a year while they were holding that seat open for Trump to get elected. And second of all, it's not sacrosanct because these people lied in their confirmation hearings about respecting precedent and overturned the will of previous Supreme Courts who had respected that very precedent as it relates to Roe. So this idea that the Supreme Court and its decisions right now are sacrosanct, it doesn't really comport with reality. So yes, I absolutely think that Biden should pack the court. I don't think that he will right now. I think that it's more of a possibility if we're able to get 2 more seats in the Senate and we actually can eliminate the filibuster, and then we can move forward with ideas like packing the court, move forward with like adding seats to the court, move forward with ideas like statehood for DC, move forward with some more climate spending, move forward with stronger gun legislation, and obviously codifying Roe. The thing about codifying Roe is if we're able to keep our majority in the House and expand our Senate majority by 2 seats and actually eliminate the filibuster, we can codify Roe. But if and when Republicans challenge that and it gets up to the Supreme Court, this Supreme Court is perfectly capable of just pointing to that and saying, well, that goes against personhood, and we deem that there's personhood from the moment of contraception, and so this law is unconstitutional. So that's a possibility. We have to go about this in a certain order. The order right now is making sure that we get enough seats to overcome that filibuster in the Senate, and that we hold the House. But then it's going to be introducing a law codifying Roe nationwide. Then that's going to pass, and then we can look at the Supreme Court because the likelihood that this Supreme Court, this 6-3 conservative court of far-right ideologues, is going to uphold that law codifying Roe is I think a little naive. So, but one thing at a time. I mean, we can't do any of this unless we're able to hold the House and add 2 seats in the Senate. So, which is why I would say, by the way, for anybody watching, I reach a good number of people every day, but even the people who I reach are not going to be nearly as influenced to do anything as they would be influenced by their own circle. So if you have people who live in any number of these swing states, if you have people who live in Florida, in Georgia, in Arizona, New Hampshire, Nevada, North Carolina, Ohio, even if you have people right here where I am in California, there are districts around me, the 27th Congressional District, the 41st Congressional District, the 49th Congressional District. 41st is Palm Springs. It's about an hour away. Those are all led by Republicans right now. Those are all flippable districts. Those are super important. So like we live in a place like California and you're like, oh, well, there's nothing I can do because, we're in this deep blue bastion. Congressional districts for House seats are flippable all across this country or are endangered all across this country. There's a congressional district in Rhode Island's 2nd Congressional District. Like deep blue Rhode Island already is at risk of losing a seat in Congress to a Republican. So no matter where you are, if you're able to like reach out to your circle of few people who may not have voted, who voted for a Republican before, who may not be aware that there's one party whose goal is introducing a nationwide abortion ban and another party whose goal is introducing nationwide protections for abortion, that might be something worth exploring with these people. So if you have people in any of these swing states and any of these swing districts, please reach out to them, because again, like it can't just be up to like the news. It can't just be up to people who you watch online. You have so much more of an impact in personal relationships than anybody else does, and so use those personal relationships to find just a few people who may not have voted and to get them to vote in November. We're just a few weeks away. Again, like we already know what's going to happen. It is as clear as day. The difference here in terms of what will happen in Congress in a Democratic-led House versus a Republican-led House is that we already know that they're going to vote on a nationwide ban on abortion. Obviously, we'll have Biden this time, who would be able to veto it if Republicans did take a majority in one or both houses, well, in both houses. But what worries me is like, okay, even for those people who are like, well, it's not really a big deal because Biden can just veto any legislation he doesn't like. Two things about that. First, if we lose the Senate, that means no more judges. And obviously, in these last few years, we've seen how important judges can be. Even in the Supreme Court, we have the ultimate example of how important a judge actually is. But second of all, if you have Republicans who take control, they've already broadcast their intention to not certify any elections where Republicans don't win. That's their intention. Their goal right now, as part of this like MAGA machine, is to make sure that their own party's candidates assume power by any means necessary. You had Trump, who did a rally in Nevada just about a week back, and there was the Secretary of State candidate who came up on stage and said, we have a collection of Secretary of State candidates who we're working with around the country. Our goal is to make sure that Donald Trump takes back the White House in 2024. If you think that any of these people are going to allow a Democrat to have a victory, you're kidding yourselves. So I know that people will look at this and say, okay, well, it's no big deal right now because Biden can veto any legislation. Again, first of all, anything that's brought before the courts, no more judges will be able to be confirmed. But second of all, if you are going to vote in 2024 anyway, and you want your vote to be able to count, then this is the election that you have to focus on first, because this is the election where the foundation for those elections is going to be laid. And so if you don't pay attention now, and we allow these extremist Secretary of State candidates who've already broadcast that their intention is to not allow any Democrats to win, if we allow them to take power, then our vote is moot anyway for 2024. So that's the whole thing. I'm saying, like, if you plan on voting as it is, then make sure your vote counts then by also voting now. And it's not a heavy lift. Showing up on November, is it November 8th? I believe it's November 8th. Yes, showing up on November 8th this year is not a heavy lift. Getting your mail ballot and returning it as soon as possible. Also, in terms of returning your ballots quickly, here's what I'll say about that. If you're able to vote fast, quickly, that means that all of those Democratic groups who have your information, who are looking out to make sure that you've already voted, they can check you off, and they can stop spending resources on you and focus on people who are unlikely voters, for example, who they do need to focus on in terms of may need 1, 2, 3, 4 messages, door knocks, whatever, to get you to turn out. So the faster you vote and you say, I've already voted, they can check you off and they can move on to the next person and spend their resources and time and energy on somebody else who might need a little bit more nudging. So if you're a guaranteed vote, which I presume if you're watching this right now, you're one of those rare people who people like me love, because I wish people would pay attention to the degree that you watching right now do. It would make my life a hell of a lot easier. But you're one of those people who is paying attention to this stuff, who does have the ability to do what needs to be done to make sure that we have the best chance of winning possible. So I would just say, again, reach out to your people, reach out to your circle and make sure that they're prepared to vote, that they have a plan to vote, or bring them to vote. And B, vote early. That's the best way. This way, all of those people who are going to reach out to you can use those resources elsewhere on voters who may be a little bit more unlikely to do so. Mitch said, conservatives in my area are saying the opposite. Wait until later to vote so it can't be tampered with. I would disagree with the premise of that. No one's tampering with. I mean, there's this whole conspiracy, like, intertwined within the entire Republican narrative that the deep state and Hugo Chavez and the Chinese and Hillary Clinton are all tampering with your votes. Vote early. Get it out of the way. Make sure your vote counts. A lot of states will allow you to track your ballot. If you've gone in person and you know that it's counted, get it done. This way, those resources to reach out to voters to get them to turn out can be used on people who are less likely to vote. Vote early. Get it done as soon as possible. If you have early voting, I know a lot of states, there are some states who are voting now for the 2022 election. Get it done. Get it done as fast as humanly possible. Get that vote in. Make sure it counts. You can track it if it's a mail ballot. A lot of states will allow you to do exactly that. Celine says, Hugo Chavez is dead. I don't get it. Yeah, none of us do. I think that's the point. And would Hugo Chavez die in 2013? Yeah, 2013. and yet he was somehow a major part of the Republicans' conspiracy about Democrats meddling in this election. That should pretty much explain everything. Okay, we are about 20 minutes out from this hearing beginning. I believe Abigail asked, is bringing a sample ballot to the voting booth allowed? There's so many names, I'm afraid I won't remember them all. I believe you can bring a sample ballot, no problem. I mean, when I write down who I'm going to vote for, I keep it in my phone, but having a guide for yourself so that you know who to vote for is fine. I mean, you won't submit that ballot. I would check, just ask when you get there, but bringing your sample ballot is fine. Also, if you're looking for resources in terms of who to vote for, check out votesaveamerica.com. Vote Save America, that's part of Pod Save America. They do a great job with their Vote Save America stuff. So that's what I would say for that. One announcement too. We're about 20 minutes out. Do want to make a quick announcement. I'm selling wine called Codify Rosé. It's a rosé, obviously. Codify Rosé. All of the profits are going to voter registration, an organization called Field Team 6. So if you go to, I'm going to put the link in the chat here, and if you are interested in buying wine to support voter registration, you can check out my website, briantylercohen.com, and just click on Codify Rosé. It makes a really good gift. The bottle is really nice, and all of those profits are going to Field Team 6, which is a voter registration organization. In 2020, they registered 1.5 million Democrats. They're able to register new voters for $1.50 per voter. And so those are up for sale right now. So if you're interested, that's the pinned comment in the chat. You can also just type in briantylercohen.com and find it that way. So that's my product talking for the moment. Anyway, if you want to throw questions back in, someone just asked how far in her political career can Katie Porter go? I was just having this conversation, I think, 2 days ago. If Katie Porter does not at some point run for president, I think that it will be a huge missed opportunity. A huge missed opportunity. I think Katie Porter is, like, not exaggerating in the slightest, the best the Democratic Party has to offer. Someone asked, is the wine available outside of the United States? No, unfortunately, the wine is not able to ship overseas. There's also a few states that don't allow alcohol sales. Those states are Alabama, Arkansas, Delaware, Hawaii, Mississippi, North Dakota, South Dakota, Rhode Island, Utah, Vermont, and West Virginia. So if you don't live in those states and you want to order that wine, check out the store. Again, it's the pinned comment in the chat right now, or you can just type briantylercohen.com. Shipping is a few weeks, but the money will be donated immediately. So that's where we're at with that. Okay, we're about just over 15 minutes away from starting. Again, for people who are just tuning in right now, we're about just over 15 minutes away from beginning. If you want to support my channel, the best way is just subscribe. It's free. That's the best way to support my work. I do breaking news videos every day, live streams like this one, and interviews as well. So I've interviewed Biden, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Jamie Raskin, Buttigieg, Jen Psaki. Actually, I have a pretty exciting interview next week. This week I had John Fetterman, and there's an interview being released today after this hearing with Amy Klobuchar about the Electoral Count Act. That is the law, that's the bipartisan law that passed through the Senate committee 14-1. So it looks like that is going to have a good chance of passing the full Senate. That would kind of reaffirm these rules that the vice president's role is purely ceremonial, and that's obviously to prevent another Mike Pence-like figure from being pressured into unilaterally deciding who wins the election. And it also raises the bar in terms of how many people can gum up the proceedings by objecting to the votes. I think now they need 20% of the caucus to be able to do that. 20% of the caucus or 20% of the entire House to be able to object. so that they can then retreat back for an hour and discuss the objection. Right now, I believe one member of the House and one member of the Senate, that's all it takes to be able to do that. And if you have someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ted Cruz, two lunatics, then you'll be able to do that for every state, no problem, and allow these lies to continue to fester about there being fraud or a rigged system, blah blah blah. So that interview is coming out today with Amy Klobuchar. We talk all about the Electoral Count Act. Next week, I have Stacey Abrams. That is going to be a really exciting one. I have been trying to interview Stacey Abrams for a very, very long time. So that is a really exciting interview coming out. So anyway, if you want to check that interview out, just make sure to subscribe to this channel, and you'll see that probably Sunday or Monday. So coming up really soon. As we were saying before, you can throw questions into the chat now and we'll talk about them. 15 minutes away, so let's... Okay, so the committee, the feed from C-SPAN is live now. I am not going to turn it on, the audio on, because it's just murmuring basically at this point. But we're getting close. We're less than 15 minutes away. East asked, what would need to happen for Trump to be disqualified to run as a presidential candidate? I think right now, if he were to be convicted of in this ongoing DOJ investigation, that would be some charges carry with them a disqualification from holding future federal office or from holding future office. Obviously, anything like seditious conspiracy would have that consequence. We don't know what it's going to be yet because we haven't seen any charges, but that's what it would be. If he were indicted in the Senate trial, he would have been prevented from running in the future. And again, I explained this a little bit earlier, but for people who have missed it, this whole civil war that's erupted between McConnell and Trump is especially ironic because McConnell refused to vote to convict Trump in that second impeachment trial, and basically by virtue of doing that allowed him to retain all of his power because he could continue to basically hint that he's running again in 2024 and remains the presumptive 2024 Republican nominee. Had Mitch McConnell and the rest of those Republicans just voted to convict him when he was actually worthy of being convicted, and when they had the chance to do exactly that, he'd have been disqualified from running for office again. And so this same guy who's now releasing statements on a weekly basis attacking Mitch McConnell or saying like racist slurs about his wife, the only reason that Trump has that power is because someone like Mitch McConnell allowed him to retain it. And so, that's a situation where this like fealty to Donald Trump, this like horror about stepping on his toes or doing anything that might undermine the guy, kind of comes back to bite all of those people who protected him in the ass because now he's moving on to attack them, and they're the ones who allowed him to retain that power. So that's just the ultimate irony here. Oh, there's a sync issue. Okay, let me work on that sync issue. Try not to look at my mouth. Actually, let me know if there's a sync issue on this screen. Test 1 2 3. Do you guys hear a sync issue? Just let me know in the comments if the sync is out here. Okay. I see a lot of people saying that the sync is fine now. Excellent. Sorry about that. Gotta love running the entire studio here. As someone who really doesn't have like a technical background. We are 10 minutes out. 10 minutes out from this January 6th committee hearing beginning. Let's go to that screen. A little bit more comfortable. Cool. Thank you guys for watching. I know that there's a ton of channels that you can watch at. Thank you for subscribing. This channel is above 1.5 million subscribers. I think we're at 1.55 million. So thank you for subscribing. If you're not yet subscribed, please consider subscribing. And I was gonna make some really corny joke about join the 1.5 million people and see what you're missing. But throw me a subscribe if you're not yet subscribed. Again, breaking news videos every day, interviews. We have a good one with Stacey Abrams coming out in just a few days from now. Ethan has volunteered to be my IT guy. Someone asked, a lot of people ask if I'm gonna run. I won't run for office. I would not run for office. I think, first of all, the reason that I do this is that it's important that we have a progressive media ecosystem, and not just this channel. I'm like very clear about lifting up as many progressive media ecosystem channels as I can. For example, if you can open up another tab, subscribe to Pod Save America. My friends over at Pod Save America have been super helpful in terms of helping my podcast grow. If we can help their YouTube channel grow, just go to YouTube, type in Pod Save America, subscribe to them. They're a huge resource. They're a major part of my news diet. So definitely, if you're looking for a small step that you can take in terms of helping other channels grow, click on Pod Save America. That would be a really great one to subscribe to. It's what I watch, and they've just revamped their entire channel. So definitely go to Pod Save America on YouTube. Throw them a quick subscribe. So today's hearing, which is going to begin in just over 5 minutes, will focus on, I don't believe there's going to be witnesses, but it's going to focus on, I believe, a number of Trump's former cabinet secretaries, including Elaine Chao, who I explained before, was on the receiving end of this racist statement from Trump. We're going to hear from, I believe, information regarding Mike Pompeo, regarding Secretary of Treasury Steve Mnuchin, but something that I'm pretty certain about is that we'll hear something related to the Secret Service. The January 6th committee, since its last hearing, has received more than 1 million communications from the Secret Service that as it was leading up to the events of January 6th. An aide told reporters, quote, "We will be presenting a great deal of new documentary evidence tomorrow, and certainly among that evidence will include information from the hundreds of thousands of pages that the United States Secret Service has produced to the committee pursuant to the committee's subpoena of July." So expect to hear some information regarding the Secret Service as well. I'm going to turn the audio on here. The din of the January 6th committee hearing. I'll raise that audio once they take the stage, and I'll likely mute myself out.
Live pictures coming to us from the Cannon House office building on Capitol Hill as we wait for the start of today's January 6th committee.
You can look at my
This is
pinned
the
message in the
ninth
chat
public
and
hearing the
subscribe
committee
to
held.
Pod Save America.
Before today,
Also,
the
there's a
most
number
recent
of
hearing
other
occurred
channels
back
that
in
you should
July.
definitely subscribe
This
to.
particular hearing
Pac-Man, the
had
Young
been scheduled to
Turks,
take place on
Glenn
September
Kirshner,
28th.
Abdul El Sayed
Postponed
is a
due to
great one.
Hurricane Ian.
Bo
A
of the
quick
Fifth
reminder
Column.
that these hearings and all
Sam
C-SPAN
Cedar.
programs are brought to you as a public
There are,
service by the cable industry,
you can throw them in the chat.
and these television
There are a
providers,
number of
including Altice,
amazing channels. I
Wow,
think the whole point
Sparklight,
here is to just
and
kind of
Turner
raise up the entire
Communications.
progressive media ecosystem
We expect committee members to be
as much as we can and subscribe to as many of these channels as we can. To go back to those channels, I mean, Hassan, Ring of Fire, TYT, Midas Touch, Tom Hartman, Bo of the Fifth Column, Jeff Waldorf, Rational National, Hal Sparks, Jesse Dollamore, Vosh, Secular Talk, Hal Klinsky. Klinsky was like one of the first channels that I ever subscribed to. So yeah, there's a ton of great ones. There's no shortage of channels to support. Okay, we are moments away from this committee hearing beginning. they should be walking in any moment. But in the meantime, I would just ask one last time, if you are not yet subscribed to my channel and want to support what I do, this is the best way. Just subscribing to the channel is the best way. It doesn't cost you anything, but it's the best way to support my work. So just hit the subscribe button. That would be highly appreciated. Okay, we are just about ready to go. Someone asked, how long will Codify Rosé be available to buy? I'm not sure how long it'll be available to buy. I'm going to throw the link into the chat one more time. Again, if anyone's looking for a gift and you want to support voter registration, I'm selling wine called Codify Rosé. It is available in the US. I just pinned that link, so just check the chat. You can go to briantylercohen.com. Profits go to Field Team 6, which is an amazing voter registration organization. The bottle is really nice. It says Codify Rosé on it. Definitely check it out on the website. It's a good gift. Again, profits go to voter registration. The wine won't come for a few weeks, but the donation goes immediately to the voter registration organization. I've been in contact with them every day. If you don't know Field Team 6, they do really, really amazing work. Registered 1.5 million Democrats in 2020. They're able to register new voters for $1.50 per new voter. So I love that organization. I've helped them as much as I can, and this was something that I, thought would be fun to do in terms of yes, it's finding a way to donate, but you actually get something from it. And it's a really cool bottle of wine. Okay, it is 10:01 Pacific, 1:01 Eastern. Any second now, January 6th committee is going to come in and get this committee hearing started. There's no reporting of a late start, so we should be hearing from them literally any second. Okay, and here they come. For people just tuning in, the committee hearing is starting right now. You haven't missed anything. This is them first walking in for those just tuning in right now. I know it's 7 p.m. in Europe. Okay, a lot to cover from what we just saw, but first and foremost, I think the most important thing right now is to reiterate NBC News' reporting that was revealed about 30 minutes ago, and I had stopped the committee hearing to announce this when I found out, but NBC News is reporting that the January 6th committee is planning to vote today at this hearing to subpoena Donald Trump. So again, we'll see if this actually pans out, but this is what NBC is reporting right now. There has been an ongoing question for months now as to whether the committee would actually subpoena Donald Trump. If that reporting is correct, which again, we'll find out at some point over the next hour or so. But if that reporting is correct, then then there's a good possibility that we'll see Trump either come before the committee or, which is more likely, engage in some delay tactic to prevent himself from having to show up for that committee. Again, these delay tactics are nothing new for the guy. We just found out yesterday that Trump is going to be forced to come show up in person on October 19th, which is less than a week from today, to be deposed for a defamation lawsuit regarding E. Jean Carroll. Trump had said that she had accused him of rape, and Trump had said, she's not my type. She's just making up this allegation to sell her book. And so that Carol sued him as part of a defamation lawsuit, and that's been delayed now for 20 months and counting. So these delay tactics are nothing new. I don't know what will happen in terms of whether we'll actually see some of this play out in terms of if they vote to subpoena him and he shows up or not. But this is something that we'll find out hopefully in the next hour or so. So for those of you just joining, that's some pretty big news that we've been waiting for a long time. Again, this was billed as the final January 6th committee hearing. Obviously, these billings can change. Things can happen at any moment. They're not beholden to any schedule. They kind of do what they want. So I think that this is something that we've been looking forward to. We'll see what happens if this NBC News reporting actually comes to bear. But again, for those of you just checking in now, according to NBC, the January 6th committee is planning to vote to subpoena Trump during today's hearing. Just a couple of interesting points that I wanted to touch on that we've seen from today's hearing thus far. And that is, first and foremost, we had a couple of people, including Tom Fitton, who is a conservative activist. I think he runs Judicial Watch, which is ironic, as if we needed somebody like this guy to be watching the judicial system while he is simultaneously undermining our democracy. But there's a guy named Tom Fitton who basically revealed that his plan was, by virtue of giving Trump a statement, to declare victory before any victory had actually been achieved. Let me see if I could pull a quote from his email. He had drafted up an email of things that Trump could say himself, including, "We had an election today and I won. And the ballots counted by the election day deadline show that the American people have bestowed on me the great honor of re-election to President of the United States." Now, the important thing to note here is that there is no election day deadline. That is a made-up thing. Again, the notion that you need this guy from an outlet that purports to be there to watch the judicial system while he's simultaneously lying outright about a deadline, a non-existent deadline on election day. There are still ballots that come in that need to be counted, in some cases weeks after election day. There's an amount of time that the mail is allowed to actually come in. Some of these ballots are counted because they're just by virtue of how many there are and by virtue of how archaic our election system is. It takes days for this stuff to actually be done. So for him to go out and say that there was an election day deadline was a purposeful attempt to help Trump overturn the election, because in a number of these states, even in states where they had early voting, they made sure that none of those ballots that were cast early could actually be counted. States like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, states where they had Republican-led legislatures. And so, knowing full well that Democrats would be the ones submitting their ballots early by mail, and that Republicans would overwhelmingly vote in person on election day, they purposefully disallowed the state legislatures to begin counting those mail-in ballots in advance, so that the first ballots that would be counted were from the election day ballots that would skew overwhelmingly in Trump's favor. So, and then afterwards, only once those Trump ballots had finally come in, then they would begin counting the ballots for Joe Biden. But it would give the impression, it would give the optics that Trump was way ahead, and then all of a sudden something nefarious happened, and a bunch of sneaky ballots came in, and vote dumps in the cities, and they've stolen it from Donald Trump. This is all part of a concerted effort to steal the election on his behalf, or to paint the election as if it was stolen by Democrats because of late ballots coming in. So the whole thing was done for optics. It was done in coordination with Republican-led legislatures who purposefully didn't allow these early ballots to be counted, even though they know, because of the express reason that they knew these ballots would be overwhelmingly for Democrats, and they needed to give Trump the impression of leading on election day, so that they can then introduce statements like this one, where someone like Tom Cotton could say, the ballots counted by the election day deadline show that the American people have bestowed the honor of the presidency to Donald Trump. There is no election day deadline. It was all part of a concerted effort. There was also a video that we saw from Roger Stone where he was even more overt about what he was trying to do and basically just says, we're going to declare victory, and if anybody says no, we just say, fuck you, I won. That's it. I mean, there's not a whole lot of like discretion on that one. At least Tom Fitton, when he was lying about fake deadlines that didn't exist, at least he could try to give the impression that they're following some made-up strategy here. But the other side of that is that these people were just there to demand the presidency and be perfectly willing and able to use violence if and when they didn't get their way. And that's exactly what they did. I mean, you saw that the Proud Boys were there. You saw these far-right militia groups that were there. All of them were doing the exact same thing. They were there to look to kill people who were standing in their way and to try to pressure members of Congress into doing their bidding. I mean, they were there to literally kill the vice president. So, and like, I get how frustrating it is in that I don't know how much more evidence we need of how much of a top-down plot this was to overturn the election from Donald Trump all the way down. We know, based on what we heard at this hearing, that Donald Trump was well aware of the violence. He was told of all of these instances where he would make up bullshit examples of election fraud, like for example by saying how in Michigan there were suitcases of ballots that were found, and then he was told the truth by his own his own advisors and members of the Justice Department, and then he went out regardless 4 days later, 5 days later, 10 days later on January 6th, and he stood up on stage and said, you all know that there were ballots that were stored in suitcases. And so he was told these things. He was told the truth about these things that he was saying in advance, chose to lie anyway for the express purpose of deceiving the January 6th rally participants, knowing full well that they were capable of and willing to and intending to commit violence at the Capitol. That's exactly what he did. That's exactly what they did. And then we're supposed to turn around and act like he had no idea that any of this was going to happen. Trump even said to Cassidy Hutchinson, we found out today as well, quote, I don't want people to know that we lost, which establishes that he lost, he knew he lost, and he deliberately made the conscious decision to steal the election by ignoring all of these court cases, by ignoring all of the facts that were presented to him, by ignoring everything that the DOJ told him, and instead lying to his supporters so that he could rile them up and incite them to go storm the Capitol, which they did. We also heard from Adam Kinzinger that he rushed to issue a large-scale troop withdrawal from a bunch of countries abroad, knowing that it would create, that it would have catastrophic consequences by virtue of doing it. If he knew that he won the presidency, there's no reason why he would basically sabotage himself by creating, by directing all of these troop withdrawals that he knew that he was told were going to pose this massive problem that were going to create catastrophic consequences. The fact that he chose to do it shows that he knew he lost, and yet, while he knew that he was going to lose and he was already in the process of sabotaging his successor, at the same time, he was still pushing forward with all of these bogus efforts to overturn the election. And then, of course, the call to Brad Raffensperger, where he demanded 11,780 votes. I don't know if I hadn't heard the entire phone call. I probably did and just forgot it at this point. But like the egregiousness with which he asked for more votes. I mean, he literally said, quote, fellas, I just need 11,000 votes. Give me a break. I mean, he's under investigation in Fulton County. He's being charged in Fulton County for this exact thing. But just, again, going back to the same thing, if anybody else did this, if anybody, any like town council member of Congress even, said anything like this, they'd be indicted by the end of the week. And yet here we are. It's been, has it been a year since this happened? And we're still waiting for something to happen. Again, I don't know if it's the speed with which the DOJ moves. I don't know if it's the impotence of the DOJ, but a lot of this seems really open and shut. And I can guarantee you that if anybody of like less importance, of smaller stature, were to have done or said any of these things that we know that Trump said, because it was recorded, we heard the recordings, by the end of the week, that person would be in handcuffs. So, again, thank God for the committee. Thank God that we get to see this stuff. Remember that the committee is not the DOJ. There's no enforcement mechanism. It's a fact-finding mission. They're not able to charge anyone. They're not able to arrest anyone. But it's important because everything that we're seeing right now is ostensibly what the Justice Department already knows. And it's going to make it really, really difficult if the Justice Department was considering not charging Trump, given what we're all seeing now. Because all this would have happened behind the scenes. Like, all of this information would have been behind the scenes in the DOJ. We wouldn't have had any exposure, any insight into any of it. But because of this committee, we have insight into all of it. And so it's going to make things really difficult if the DOJ, knowing what we now know, given all of this evidence, decides to do nothing. So we should find out in the next hour or so if this NBC News scoop is true, that the January 6th committee plans to vote to subpoena Donald Trump during today's hearing. I'm not sure what I would, I'm not sure if I would like put money on him actually showing up if he's subpoenaed. I think he's mired in so many investigations and dealing with so many charges right now anyway, that I'm not sure that he would even, that it would even be a big deal for him to ignore just one more. He's dealing with the DOJ investigation into the stolen documents, classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. He's dealing with, obviously, this investigation into January 6th, the New York Attorney General civil case with Letitia James over the Trump Organization. There's the criminal case that's ongoing with Alvin Bragg, also in New York. There's the Fulton County DA's investigation into him requesting 11,780 votes from Brad Raffensperger. So he's contending with all of these issues right now. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if the January 6th committee does ultimately pull through and request to subpoena him or vote to subpoena him, and then B, if they do that, if he actually goes through with it. If he doesn't, and we've seen already Steve Bannon get charged for ignoring a congressional subpoena. Steve Bannon, if I'm not mistaken, turned himself in. I think that he's I don't think he's in custody. But in any case, it looks like the committee is coming back in. Real quick, I would ask you, if you're not yet subscribed to this channel, please consider subscribing to this channel. It's free, it doesn't cost you anything, but that's the best way to support my work. So if you want to see more of these hearings, especially as we possibly find out that Trump will be subpoenaed to appear, please subscribe so that you don't miss any of this. Wow. Okay. So obviously some major news there. The committee voted unanimously to subpoena Donald Trump. Did not think we would see that today. I stopped this. I interjected for a moment in the middle of this hearing when NBC reported, and NBC got their scoop that the committee would vote to subpoena Trump. Wasn't sure that it was going to happen. They obviously did do that. So this was billed as the final January 6th committee hearing. Obviously, that's up in the air. Every time the January 6th committee says that it's the final hearing or whatever, that always remains to be seen. We didn't know if we would have this committee hearing. And now, given this new information that they voted to subpoena Trump, there could be hearings that come up in the future. One important thing to note is, this committee, if Republicans take control in this midterm election that's coming up in less than a month, this committee will likely be dissolved. So, one more reason if you want to see this stuff move forward, and if you want to see Trump, have to testify, if we get to that point, if he doesn't delay until the end of time, then it would behoove us to make sure that Democrats are able to hold the House, because it's only if Democrats are able to hold the House that we'll actually see some of these testimonies actually move forward. Kevin McCarthy, ironically enough, has said that he would change the committee's mission, basically, to investigate why Nancy Pelosi didn't call for backup on January 6th. What's ironic about that is that we now have video evidence that that's exactly what she did on January 6th. And not just Nancy Pelosi, also Chuck Schumer, also Steny Hoyer, also Mike Pence was on the phone. All of those people, solely Democrats, were working to make sure that law enforcement was actually called, that backup was actually called, and the only person actually missing from these phone calls, amid Pence and Pelosi and Hoyer and Schumer, was Donald Trump. He was the only one who wasn't actually there. And obviously that was because the violence wasn't some accidental byproduct. It was the point. It wasn't a bug. It was a feature. The violence is exactly what he wanted. So, when McCarthy takes, if Republicans are able to take control of the House, and he has already said that he wants to, flip this committee mission on its head and find out why Nancy Pelosi was not calling for backup. Well, now he has no reason, no rationale to do that, because we already have video evidence now that that's exactly what he tried to do. So, just one more way that the January 6th committee has kind of gotten out in front of these bad faith talking points put forward by Republicans, like this idea, for example, that it was the Democrats who were responsible for making sure that the situation wasn't safe. Meanwhile, you've got Donald Trump, who spent hours and hours and hours watching this shit from his TV, from the residence, from just sitting there, throwing ketchup on the walls or doing whatever he was trying to do. All of it was to delay actually having to do anything to quell this violence, and that was because the violence was the point. It's what he wanted. This violence was his political tool to try to pressure Mike Pence and other Republican lawmakers into doing his bidding, to illegally overturning the election results. And so, of course, the guy wasn't going to call off the violence, because that was what he had spent weeks preparing for, instigating, inciting. That's the whole point of this. So now Trump will be subpoenaed to testify. Steve Bannon had ignored his congressional subpoena, and he was taken into custody, obviously released, but we'll see what happens. If nothing else, I'm positive that Trump will try to delay this as much as humanly possible. We'll see. I mean, it'll get added to the long list of other charges that he's facing right now. I spoke about this in the pre-show, but he's facing, obviously, the DOJ's investigation into stolen documents at Mar-a-Lago that he took from the White House. There were over 300 classified documents. There is this DOJ investigation into inciting the events of January 6th. There is the New York AG's investigation into the Trump Organization and basically lowering the values of his assets when it came time to pay taxes, but inflating the values of those assets so that he can get better terms on loans. There is the criminal investigation of that same Trump Organization topic that's happening right now with Alvin Bragg as well. Then there's the Fulton County DA's investigation into Trump trying to pressure Brad Raffensperger, the Georgia Secretary of State, to find 11,780 votes. That's a point that they touched on today in this committee hearing. So he definitely doesn't have any shortage of these legal troubles to be dealing with right now. But I think first and foremost on his mind today is this fact that the committee has compelled him to testify. So again, not holding my breath that he will voluntarily comply, but there have been other members of the Trump administration, former Trump administration, who haven't complied, and they've dealt with legal issues of their own as a result of that. So we'll see what happens. Remains to be seen. But as far as I would imagine, this is a good thing to see. This is a promising development and something that I've wanted to see for a long time. This idea that he shouldn't even be compelled to testify for something that was so blatantly of his own doing, so blatantly incited by him and coordinated by him, have him come and testify. So we'll see what happens with that. But in any case, I do want to ask, for those of you who've tuned in, who have listened to this post show, if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, if you could please subscribe. That is the single best way to support what I do. The second thing is I'm selling wine. It's called Codify Rosé. It's a rosé. All profits go to Field Team 6, which is an amazing voter registration organization. You can go find that wine on my website. I am dropping the link in the chat for this live stream right now, and I'll pin it. You can also find it, if you're not looking at the chat, just by going to briantylercohen.com. So again, selling Codify Rosé wine, and profits will go to voter registration organizations. Voter registration deadlines are upon us right now. There were a number of states that had those deadlines on the 11th. And then coming up in these next couple weeks, a number of other battleground states are going to have their deadlines. So this is when your money goes the farthest. So if you were going to donate anyway, at least get a bottle of wine out of it. So makes a good gift too. So with that said, again, if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. I will continue to live stream these hearings, especially if we have any indication that we'll have some type of testimony by Trump. Although I imagine that a deposition would not be in public, but we'll see what happens. In any case, I'll host it wherever it is. So, with that said, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it. I know that you have a lot of different channels and both on TV and on YouTube that you can watch for this coverage. So I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you so much, and tune in later today because I have an interview coming out on this channel with Amy Klobuchar, and then a few days from now I have another interview coming out with Stacey Abrams. Okay, thanks.